Hi, this is Dave Belsky, your host of the Sunset Session. This is episode 21. Our guest today is Kellen OKeefe, the president and interim CEO of Flower One. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
It's great to be here. Beautiful day, beautiful time.
What a spot.
Well, you've been working in the legal cannabis industry for 5 years, which or more, almost 6. It's an eternity. And most of the people that are in the legal industry got in recently, got in the last year or two. So you've seen a lot, right? Talk to me about how cannabis shaped your life before joining the industry and what it was that you decided this is where you wanted to work.
Sure. I mean, I've always had an intimate relationship with the plant. Going back to a teenager, I've used cannabis and used it regularly. I think, coming into the industry, I was taught to look at that much differently than I think I had. I personally had probably a little bit of shame or felt that my use was more recreational than in fact it was really, a wellness or medicine. And I think that coming into the industry, I was still uncertain as to the effectiveness of cannabis as medicine and how powerful it was. And then I lost my father to pancreatic cancer in 2012, and that experience really pushed me into the industry and really opened my eyes to how incredibly powerful cannabis was or is as medicine and above and beyond just a wellness product, but something that can replace much more serious narcotics and drugs like painkillers and antidepressants and things that unfortunately our society and people have a problem with, not only when you're facing incredible or serious pain or dying of cancer, but also kind of unfortunately on a regular basis. So I think cannabis provides a pretty amazing is an amazing plant that provides a plethora of uses, and I think it's something that it opened my eyes to and drove me to joining the industry publicly, and as you mentioned, being comfortable putting it on LinkedIn.
Right. Well, and thank you for sharing a very, very personal story. But I think in my experience, as we're recruiting largely white collar professionals, executives into the industry, you see people that are sober-minded as they get, CFOs, chief legal officers, that may not be users, but they've seen firsthand the power of the plant as it relates to higher quality of life for folks that need it the most. And it's that awareness that makes it very mission-driven for people that decide to get involved, and I think is incredibly unique to this plant as a industry and as a profession. You find that alignment, right? At first full-time job in cannabis was at MedMen during an incredibly rocket ship trajectory, something never been done before, right? 9 figures raised and then more raised, and you were in charge of business development for MedMen, what did that actually mean?
I was responsible for a lot of things at MedMen. I raised a good amount of the private capital for the company, as well as sourcing a number of the M&A transactions, including licenses here in California, as well as other states like Arizona, and even larger, deals like PharmaCann. I'm really proud of the work that we set out to do at MedMen. As you mentioned, like in the early days, it was really about becoming and doing something that nobody had done before, and really ushering in an industry that we could hopefully be proud of. I think MedMen doesn't often get enough credit for some of the work that it did, in the early days. For example, lobbying, to help legalize cannabis and make a lot of progress on that front. And so I think there was a lot of great things done, and as we all know, there were parts of the company that we wish went a different direction.
Yeah, but it was the epitome of an early thesis for legal cannabis, which was, let's go really wide. Let's plant as many flags as we can, and we'll figure out how to operationalize it. Let's get these licenses. We know that people want access. These licenses will be valuable. But building a vertically integrated plant-touching cannabis company in a handful of states, let alone a dozen states, is the hardest thing that anyone's ever tried to do, right?
It's
It's a lot. But what you said about MedMen like shaping the public policy as it relates to cannabis, I think that's something that, you know, I would be very, very proud of being part of that as well, because at the time, you know, it said, oh, MedMen dropped tens of millions of dollars in lobbying in Florida. You know, you hear stories like that, and it's like, but we're impacting the legalization movement by actually spending money to write laws that would actually legalize cannabis. I mean, and I feel like, you know, I know that there's corporate responsibility and government relations teams for some of the, you know, more upstart and fast-moving MSOs, but I don't know if any of them are spending the amount of money that MedMen was.
That's true.
Did you have experience raising money before cannabis?
Never to the same extent, no. And I think, again, it also goes to show that when you're passionate about something and you love something and you're good at it, people tend to gravitate to that and understand it. And I think, you know, investors were truly looking, and ours continue to look to, you know, to those that do understand cannabis as they try to figure out where the best place for them is.
Sure. I totally hear that, and I think at MedMen, obviously being like you were in charge of business development, but as you said, you did so many things. I mean, it was the retailer that every brand wanted to be in, because there weren't a lot of retailers in California, especially in the early days of the legal market, you know, 2018, that had, you know, more than a handful of shops open in the state, right?
That's true.
So you had a chance to meet brands, and MedMen at the time was investing in some brands as well. What was the moment when you're like, I think I should keep my eyes open and start looking for my next play? I want to stay in this industry, but I need to find a different ship.
I don't know if there was any particular moment. You know, I'd had the privilege of working and helping a number of large cannabis brands, you know, get themselves capitalized, and you know, look at expansion into multiple markets. And as I was going through that process, you know, I had the opportunity of getting very close with some of the entrepreneurs that I look up to in the space, you know, like Berner, like the founders of Old Pal, and like some of the others that, you know, I think have done a really great job on the brand side of cannabis, and was trying to figure out what was next, and looking at how those brands were going to scale, and how they were going to actually live into or you know, fulfill their ambitions with regards to scaling the brands, right? And so I think what was important.
I mean, like, keep up with demand. Like, these were brands that consumers that wanted to buy as much as possible, but they couldn't find it, or they couldn't produce fast enough.
Correct, right? And the supply chain, even in the most evolved markets like California, has been broken, you know, due to a number of very tough challenges that the whole cannabis industry is kind of facing. Sure. And so the ability to work with a company like Flower One and find a place where we could truly match this special high-tech greenhouse, right? Where you could take this incredibly high quality, low cost production and marry it to industry-leading brands to be their true brand fulfillment partner, I think was a really special opportunity, and one that I was, you know, really excited about.
Yeah, well, and we're talking about, you know, Flower One, where here's a facility that was originally created to grow as much, you know, produce, right, at a consistent price or a low price, and present an opportunity to actually have a unique environment in which to grow cannabis and grow it consistently. And, you know, all these brands that, you know, wanted to get to Nevada, you know, and you saw it as a natural fit, and I totally agree. And obviously now you're the president and interim CEO of Flower One, and are really kind of shaping the direction of where it's going, what its next steps are. But as far as I heard, you know, Flower One had its best year ever last year. And as much as Nevada was hit hard because of tourism, like, the residents of Nevada, you know, kept consuming at higher dollars, and so the industry is doing okay. And cannabis was responsible for a huge percentage of Nevada's tax revenue with the absence of gaming and as much alcohol sales, right? So what is the next year or two of Flower One in terms of where Flower One is going as a platform? Because it's the largest indoor cannabis grow facility in the U.S.?
Well, we're technically not an indoor facility, right? It is a high-tech greenhouse, and so we do utilize the power of the sun, and so it is a greenhouse. It's one of the largest greenhouses in North America, certainly in the United States for cannabis production. What's really special about it is the ability to produce indoor quality cannabis, utilizing far less resources, right? Less power, than indoor or other comparable cannabis facilities. We are able, that in turn really allows us to produce high quality cannabis that we can sell at an affordable price. And that's really important. I think that everyone deserves to have access to premium quality cannabis at affordable prices. And I think our facility and model allows us to provide that in a way that unfortunately the industry has not been able to do at scale yet.
Right. Well, and every state in this industry is a little bit different, right? I mean, Illinois, there's $70, $80 eighths, and it's not high quality, right?
Right.
California, you find all ends of the spectrum, right? There's some really high-end indoor flower. There's a lot of stuff in the middle, but with price compression downward. And Nevada, you find it like from a consumer standpoint, is it a more sort of knowledgeable consumer base, like they understand quality?
Yeah, I think Nevada has really great cannabis. Due to the regulations, things are difficult. It's a more strict market relative to
like
microbials. Testing. Yeah, when it comes to testing,
much more than California.
Much more so than California.
Wow.
In fact, we see Nevada, California testing is probably about 4 or 5 percentage points higher on product than we see in Nevada. Which is very interesting
because as you
THC
see, count?
Correct, THC
wow.
count, yeah, and that's probably why you see California cannabis creeping up into the mid 30s, closer to which is
like 40% THC,
yeah,
really?
which is challenging, relative to the biology, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah.
Where do you see? People thought that California was going to shape the global cannabis industry from a brand standpoint, and it still could prove to be the case,
sure.
But it definitely didn't happen as quickly as people thought in 2018, right? When you went to Hall of Flowers and there was 500 different vape brands with more or less the same thing, and a lot of those brands are no longer here, but the ones that were authentic are still around, and there's a lot of innovation, obviously, in a very competitive market that happens in terms of form factors like this. And do you think that California brands will shape the global cannabis industry?
I do. I think that there will be brands from outside of California that also play a meaningful role, but I do believe that some of the best and some of the most authentic and I think powerful brands in cannabis will originate from California. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, how inherently tied cannabis and California are together in general from a cultural perspective. I think, cannabis has been more widely accepted here than I think most places, right?
For a long time.
Yeah, for a very long time. And I think because of that, some, really incredible brands have been born out of the California landscape that I think have real staying power. And if you look at, brands like Cookies and brands like Kiva and brands like Old Pal and Heavy Hitters, and I think these brands, have been around for long enough and developed real customer loyalty, by having a real sense of pride in the products they produce, real quality control measures. These things, I think, are things that customers have come to demand and expect from those brands. And I think that's a really important part of building a brand, right? Is being able to, develop that level of loyalty and trust from your customers.
And when customers have choices, they eventually will, even in the newly rec states and in future rec states, brands and consumers' connection with a brand matters.
Absolutely. I mean, I think brands matter in almost every industry and almost everything that we do. So I think,
especially consumable things.
Right, exactly, especially consumable things. So I'm a big believer that brands will matter. The more and more evolved the supply chain is, the more and more that brands will matter. The more and more cannabis retail distribution points that come online as time progresses, the more competitive things will be and the more brands will matter. We see that even in evolved markets today, as more and more dispensaries open, you see, dispensaries try to differentiate themselves by having better brands and better products. So I think there's no question brands will play a meaningful role in the future of cannabis.
Do you think that sun-grown...
I should say California brands as well.
No, it's okay. No, I know what you meant. Do you think that sun-grown outdoor Northern California cannabis will be the most valuable cannabis on the planet one day?
No.
Like from the triangle, like the Humboldt.
Yeah,
I
mean, I think the reason that cannabis was grown in a lot of those locations was for legal reasons and to effectively hide.
Right.
I think that if you were to actually choose a climate to grow cannabis in, it would probably be the central coast of California.
Carpinteria.
Correct. Yeah. It's one of the more fertile climates and places to grow anything on the planet. So for those reasons, I think that you're going to see probably far better cannabis grown naturally outside, originating from some of those places versus some of the traditional spots inside the Northern Triangle. I think there is, with that being said, I think there is some incredible strains in Appalachian cannabis that's come out of all of these regions, frankly, from that is incredible and something that it will always be a connoisseur's product. But I think when it comes to large-scale cannabis production outside, it's probably difficult to beat the Central Coast.
Yeah, I always thought like Humboldt, just by name, like you could see some coffee shop in Paris serving Humboldt pre-rolls, and maybe there'd be some type of appellation system. But you're right. I mean, appellation for Santa Barbara County could be just as.
I agree. I hear you on that. But today you still see the majority of connoisseur product is typically indoor cannabis, totally. Right? And exotic strains of indoor cannabis, cultivated at usually relatively small scale. Right. And I think that that will continue to have a big play a key role in the industry and the supply chain moving forward as well.
Can you do premium cannabis like small drops like of Jungle Boys and Alien Labs, like at scale? Is that how has cannabis cultivation evolved in the past year or two, and where's it going?
I believe that brands need to offer a wider variety of products at various price points to consumers in order to complete their shelf and their product offering, so to speak. So I think it's really important for us, and again, as a partner to Cookies and a partner to 22 Red and other cannabis brands that are premium and have some of the best indoor cannabis in the world that they're known for. Our ability to produce that cannabis and produce greenhouse cannabis and for those brands and sell it is a huge part of their strategy for the market in Nevada, and I believe else across the board. We can sell a pack, an eighth of Cookies at $40 instead of the $60 that indoor charges and indoor cannabis costs, which customers are absolutely thrilled about.
Right.
It's almost indistinguishable in quality level from indoor, and with that type of price difference, customers are thrilled. So I think it's an important part of a complete offering for brands to have product, coming from a variety of different sources. And I think the key is just to make sure that it's priced appropriately and labeled appropriately, in which case people are really happy.
Last thing I'll ask is more in the talent lane. You're the president and interim CEO of a publicly traded cannabis company. What do you look for in your talent as you're looking for leaders for your organization so you can scale? What do you look for?
Yeah. I mean, we look for great people. We look for quality people. We think, a lot of where we are today and how we've ended up where we are today comes down to the people that we choose to work with. We've been blessed to have an incredible team on the ground. We've had an incredible group of investors that have all come together to help us, to get us on the right track. And I think, for us, the quality of the person is really the first and foremost, the most important thing as we look to scale talent. Second to that, I would say, it's really important that people genuinely love cannabis, or at least have an affection for and some personal experience with cannabis. We've seen a lot of really talented professionals come into the industry from other industries, and not done very well because of the fact that they simply don't love or don't have any real affection for cannabis. And I think it's important, if you're going to be, whether you're going to be selling it, whether you're going to be growing it, whether you're going to be packaging it, all of the above, right? Marketing it. I think it's important that you love the plant, and we're starting to see the difference between the level of candidates and the way that people are working together when they do share that passion, versus when like one of the members of the team does not.
I think that speaks to also some of the characters that I see, like the humility side of, like, you're recognizing the people who get value from this plant, and you're kind of being humbled by the mission of bringing it to folks, and and also what it takes to have to reinvent yourself as a mid to late career professional to learn the tricks that you need to be able to do your job in this industry, to make that worth it, and not be dismissive. Like, you got to believe in what you're doing, right? And you find, like, incredibly creative, intelligent people solving complex problems, doing something they believe in this industry for the places that are working well, and I think that's special.
It is. It is. And you believe in what you're doing, and you surround yourself with the right people. And I think one of the other things is to really understand your own limitations, right? People often don't know when to speak up or ask for help. And, I think one of the things that I've realized is that, some of the biggest mistakes in this industry have been made by people trying to become experts or specialists in areas that, there would take them, decades to master. And so, as somebody that's not necessarily a cultivator myself, right, that's running one of the largest cultivation companies in North America, I've come to learn and surround ourselves with really, really quality people that we trust and value their opinion and their skill set and knowledge base, and make sure that we take that into consideration as we make decisions as an organization, as a company. And I think that level of collaboration and respect for that knowledge base is a huge part of leadership in an industry where we are writing the chapter, we are writing this as we go, right? And so the ability to put the pieces together or build the airplane midair, so to speak, will rely on us to really, it relies on me to have faith in the people that I surround myself with. And that's why it's so important to pick the right people and really trust your team.
Yeah, I love it. And do people, like, share the cannabis story with you when you interview? Like, how? Because I always tell people, great to love the products. Don't fucking lead with that when you're interviewing, right? Like, don't be like,
well, I think
be educated. Be educated to the plant. Be educated to the history of the cannabis movement, to the history of the war on drugs. Like, be educated to everything, right?
I don't start with it or lead with it. Usually it becomes very apparent, and that's the reality, right? And
I love talking to people.
Like, when
I'm like, you can if you're a user, that's okay. You can tell me.
Look, I mean, I'll admit, like, I think this was one of the things that when at MedMen in early cannabis, there was, we were wrong about a lot of things. We thought that, traditional cannabis legacy operators and experience would be challenged by whether it be large scale commercial agriculture or, marketers from CPG or alcohol and what I think we've all found is the authenticity and the experience from cannabis has persevered, and in fact that level of skill and that the IP and the know-how from true cannabis legacy operators and talent has actually become what's most desirable in cannabis today, and leading to the best results. As we've gone through some operational changes on our own, we've had to turn to a lot of our partners and a lot of their skill and their IP in really delivering the best result. And I think it's important that the industry really understand that and take a moment to recognize the people that made this industry possible, and also have respect for the skill sets. Just because they might have been done in a different environment, or it maybe not at quite the same scale, the respect for the craft, the level of attention to detail, and the trade is something that a very few, very select group of people have mastered, and I think it's nice to see them validated and rewarded for that in this chapter of the industry.
Right. I mean, the companies that are most successful are places that are inclusive for folks that have been in this industry from a lifestyle standpoint or from an employment standpoint for a long time, even before it was a W-2.
Right.
Right. And finding a place for them to fit in and add value. I mean, what got us all here to begin with, right? So, thank you, Kellen.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for coming in. That's a wrap.